All right. Well, it's October 2018, and we're here in Glendale, Wisconsin, with Rod Eglash, a dear friend, promoter, booker, proprietor of the renowned Id and just a lifelong pal of Larry Penn with memories to share for the Larry Penn Legacy Project. Hi, Rod.
Hi. Glad to be here and give you some memories for his legacy project. And you might need numerous episodes. I'm prolific. So, anytime you're ready, I'll give you a few.
All right. Well, yeah, whatever you would like to share with us about Larry Penn.
Yeah, also, Mark, I have files that you might want to review at some point in time.
Okay.
Some about all the gigs and different files that Larry would have been involved in. Okay. So these are some recollections. I know Larry since about 1970, when I opened the Ednego. He was involved in all three locations. The first was the Losers Club on Van Buren and Lyon. That was in the back room of Galliano's Tavern. It's still there. It's called Why Not Two. And we used couches and chairs and cut-off chairs. Some of I got later from the Finjan from the JCC's coffee house that was open for a few years, and I was youth director at the JCC. So I happened to have a good in with the furniture. Second location was Little Brothers of the Poor, 27th and Valete. And that was in an empty Walgreens store. We were there about 8 months. Larry, of course, was big with that one. And the third was 4.5 years in the basement of the Westminster Presbyterian Church on Farwell and Bellevue, Lower East Side of Milwaukee. And that was, I think, where things really got good. And the folk music was getting better and better. So, those were Ednego locations, but I knew Larry throughout that era, and I also managed Larry for a long time. And even when I wasn't his manager, I still talked with him about all the gigs. I also managed Bill Brown when they were Penn and Brown, and individually when they separated.
Tell us a few of your memories about Larry and Bill Brown together. A lot of people are not aware of that aspect of his career.
Yeah, Bill was a string-based fiddle player. They met through some church activities. Bill Brown was ex-con. Larry was involved in some after-release prison programs, and he took Bill under his wing, and they formed a group, Penn and Brown. And they were fantastic and unique, and nobody ever did anything like this before. And Larry was writing the lyrics to almost all the songs, I would say all the songs, and Bill did the melodies. And they formed a team, and they played all over the church circuits, some of the coffee houses, and auditioned for a gig at the Ednego on Van Buren and Lyon in about 1970, end of 70, I think. And that night, I remember it vividly. They auditioned before I opened. My brother and I, Norb, were together. And it must have been below zero, at least 20 below zero outside, and it was freezing inside too. And they wrote a song shortly thereafter called "You Can Freeze Your Ass at the Itanego." So they and Larry, when he talked about that story, he used to say he drank antifreeze to stay. Of course, he meant Cornet VSQ brandy.
Yeah.
And by the way, first time I ever drank out of a bottle was in front of the coffee house on 19th and Wisconsin area. And he, during a gig which I got for him at that time at the coffee house, we went outside, sat in my car, if I recall, and he pulled out a bottle of VSQ brandy, and that was the first time I ever drank out of a bottle. So that was in about 1971. And the first big gig I got for Larry was after they broke up. And it was at the Great River Folk Festival in La Crosse. And that was early 70s. And I think it put him on the map, and people across the country started knowing him. And he met numerous folk singers through those gigs because he played there every year. He also, this is spreading, jumping around.
Yeah, that's okay.
Little Rev. He opened, these were gigs that we got for him. He opened for Leo Kottke, which blew his mind. He opened for Dave Van Ronk, I think at least 3 times. He opened for Arlo Guthrie. Where and when, I'm not so sure, but it was in the 70s. He played at the No Exit in Chicago, which was our first breakthrough gig for Chicago. And that scene was operated by the Holsteins. The Holstein mafia, sort of. Not that they were illegal or violent, they were nice guys. But they controlled the folk music scene in Chicago, and you couldn't break through. But it took us a while. Pretty soon Larry was at the Old Town School of Folk Music, playing there on a regular basis. And
What do you think people were attracted to about what he did?
well,
I mean,
I
he
think
wrote great songs, but what do you think was the magic that, I mean, you'd leave humming his melodies, you know? I mean, what did you think was really, unique about what he did, or what attracted you to his music that made it special?
I actually made a note about it. First of all, he had charisma. People were drawn to him like a magnet. And I think that had to do with what I saw in him. He was like a prophet, not really a prophet, but a wise man. He was not only a biblical scholar, but he was a scholar of all life's issues. He was the modern day, at the time, philosopher. Now, the guy, there was a longshoreman, maybe you remember the guy's name, but I'm not sure if I can think of it, that did poetry.
Harvey Taylor?
No, San Francisco.
Oh,
This was in the 60s and 70s,
okay,
80s.
went further back, yeah.
Yeah. He was fantastic, and that was like Larry. Larry seemed to be of that ilk. I loved his music because it was authentic and it was traditional. And he was, for me, a role model, and for a lot of people. He was the real thing, and some of his songs reflected that. Many of his songs did.
There was a real authenticity to what
Yeah,
he did.
and right, and his voice would ring in your head, and you'd be humming and singing and pretty soon I must have heard some of those songs 1,000 times, because I used to go to every gig that I booked them at, and there were plenty. You know, he used to call Fox Point, where I lived, after I left the Old West Side. Bought a house in Fox Pernt. That was what he called Fox Pernt. And you know, that was his way of putting down suburbs.
Yeah.
I had a great deal of admiration for his greatness, and I also was so intimate with Larry that I also saw some flaws on occasion, or issues, which I many a time had discussions with him about.
He was a good friend, though. To a lot of
Absolutely,
people,
he
yeah.
was a dear old friend of something like 50 years. When Pete Seeger sang "I'm a Little Cookie" at Carnegie Hall, it blew Larry's mind. When people started recording Patchwork Quilt and other classics he wrote, he was flattered and tickled, and I think at one point there must have been 40 or 50 folk singers, because we put it in his bio,
Yes, at least.
that were
Yep.
singing his songs.
Yep.
Yeah. Father Groppe years. Well, Larry used to march across the viaduct, 6th Street, I think, viaduct in Milwaukee, to participate in the open housing marches in the 60s and 70s, early 70s, I believe late 60s. And Larry, of course, would do the music and sing as they marched, and sang in some of the, street concerts. He did that for the Cudahy sausage plant, too, when they were striking there. In fact, I think he got Pete Seeger to come and help protest.
Yes. There's a picture of that somewhere in the archive.
I probably have some also in some of my
David Drake,
stuff.
Pete Seeger, Larry Penn,
Mhm.
and Daryl Holter, I think, was.
Yeah. We don't want to forget Larry's family either. Pat was a gem. We're all nuts about Pat. And she was a brave woman and supported him all the way. And 5 children, 4 daughters, 4? Jenny, Nancy, Sharon, Teresa, and a son, Alex. Alex was called mentally retarded in that era, but he was severely disabled. Lived in a group home after they raised him at home. When they no longer could manage him, he lived in a group home. And one of your songs that you did is, I think, written by Alex. You remember what it was?
Yeah. Do 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 do
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
do 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 do. Biff's riff.
Biff's riff. And Larry called Alex Biff at times. The daughters are great kids and are trying to carry on his legacy.